this is, you know, our residents, one, they didn't feel believed by the state for a long time. But they also believe, like, wait, why are they always routinely, the state, approving pollution permits that they know are poisoning predominantly Black, brown, immigrant, low-income communities across Michigan? So they worked with a nonprofit organization called the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, and in November, I believe, or in 2021, they filed a Title VI civil rights case, a complaint. Are you familiar at all with it at all?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so Administrator Shore and some of the members of the team at Region 5 talked to me about this. You know this. I mean, the EPA was pursuing an informal resolution agreement for more than a year with community members at the table, Administrator, and again, trying to get towards a resolution with the state. And all of a sudden, the state's like, nah, we don't want to talk to them anymore. And EPA was like, okay. Do you know why?
The House Committee on Oversight held a hearing focusing on the activities of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. The primary witness was Michael Regan, the EPA Administrator. The committee, chaired by James Comer, scrutinized the EPA's implementation of environmental regulations under the Biden administration. Pete Sessions discussed his concerns about the EPA's regulatory overreach and its impact on the American public. Here's what he had to say.
There's already this morning some disagreement about the questions that we're asking you. I've heard you very clearly talk about the EPA under your leadership as cost-effective solutions, pragmatic, American needs a strong EPA, scientific-based answers, fairness. So I'd like to engage in a dialogue with you if I can, as opposed to a long-winded opportunity here. Please tell me, as we talk about formaldehyde, are you aware that the European Union occupational exposure limit was just codified at 300 parts per billion?
Yes.
You were, thank you. Are you aware that the air outside this building and the air in this room is naturally occurring with formaldehyde?
I can't speak to the...
Well, you're the head of the EPA. If you don't know that formaldehyde is everywhere as we breathe it, not only in this building but outside, so I'll tell you that answer is yes. Let it be noted the head of the EPA did not understand that formaldehyde is a naturally occurring substance. Are you aware that the Human Studies Review Board, known as HSRB, within EPA, opposed and had problems with the recommendation of 11 parts per billion that is now being codified into your rules and regulations? Were you aware that they had problems with 11 parts per billion?
I was not aware.
We're not aware. Are you, the gentleman, aware that the permissible parts per billion is 750 parts per billion under OSHA for exposure limit for formaldehyde?
Congressman Sessions, for the types of questions you're asking, we have
They're
experts.
very direct.
You
are the head of this organization, and you have proposed taking to 11 parts per billion. You showed up here and you talked about fairness, cost-effective solutions, pragmatic, scientific-based, and yet within your own boards that provide you with data and information, they have said 11 parts per billion is well out of line and cannot even be measured. And yet our friends, your friends that are up here on this committee, as we are asking you what are not tough questions. They're really pragmatic, they're science-based, they're cost-effective ways to look at things, and you are standing behind changing some 20 of these different chemicals and putting them to standards that would be, once again, Europe has their occupational exposure limit is 300 parts per billion. America's at this time under OSHA is 750 parts per billion. You did not know that it is regularly occurring all around in every room outside, and yet your own committee within your department, the Human Studies Review Board said, please do not do this. We have problems, and yet you have put your stamp on 11 parts per billion that is not even able to be calculated. And yet, if you look at 11 to 300 to 750, you chose to show up here and to say to this committee and to plead with us, you have to save every single life, and yet it cannot even be measured. You talk about fairness, you talk about cost effectiveness, you talk about being pragmatic, you talk about science-based answers, and the head of EPA showed up today and said he did not even know that formaldehyde was regularly, naturally occurring at levels well above 11 parts per billion. Mr. Chairman, this is why we seemingly have problems and why my side, yes, we are Republicans, and we're not these crazy-eyed people that you have heard about today. We are saying we want you to be pragmatic. We want you to be fair. But you can't even justify 11 parts per billion because it can't even be measured. There are no scientific measures to measure that on a regularly recurring basis. And you have put an onus on industry. Formaldehyde is used in plastics, it's used in cars, it's used in national security, it's used all over the United States, what we would call the free enterprise system, but it's capitalism. And it's a cost-effective way to look at things. I yield back my time. Sir, we do want to talk.
All right. I would now like to recognize Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. We've heard a lot today. I'd like to bring this conversation a little bit down to earth and make it more about the people that we're here to serve. I'm the Congresswoman for the Bronx and Queens. I represent a community that has some of the highest childhood asthma rates in the United States. And when we hear this conversation about how regulations threaten economic prosperity, and I jotted it down earlier because I couldn't even believe that I heard it, that economic prosperity, quote, is the #1 driver of clean air and clean water, as though our rivers were somehow, I mean, our rivers and forests were clean and unpolluted before a single factory was constructed in this country. That is the state of nature. I want us to be clear about that. Now, when we hear people use this term economic prosperity, I want folks to know at home what that is a shadow screen for is a term otherwise known as profit. Wall Street profit, very often. And Administrator Regan, you've been accused of sabotaging here the economic prosperity of this country for enforcing and introducing regulations about chemicals that this committee itself has investigated, such as PFAS. I'd like for us to dig into that a little bit. PFAS is a chemical byproduct of, and it's a chemical that's in almost everything. Teflon pans, workout gear, fire extinguisher foam. What are some of the health consequences that we have seen as a result of elevated levels of PFAS for everyday Americans?
Well, you know, they range from various types of cancers, death. These carcinogenic elements are wreaking havoc on communities all across the country.
We've had people from PFAS-affected, especially PFAS-affected communities, that have had fertility issues. Is that correct?
Yes.
Testicular cancer?
Yes.
Is that correct? Developmental delays in children? Is that consistent with what you've seen?
Yes.
Thyroid issues, increased risk of cancer, correct?
Yes.
And those people, those kids, those parents who are struggling to conceive now, that's who we respond to. That's who we answer to. Correct, Administrator Regan?
Absolutely.
The American people. Now, I want to name something. This isn't just economic prosperity. There are people and organizations and companies responsible for this. DuPont and 3M are two of the largest corporations that were responsible for PFAS dumping in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did they know that these chemicals were potentially toxic? Is that correct?
We believe they did.
And yet, there are members here of this committee that want to defend the quote-unquote economic right for a company to poison its people, the American people. Now, when we talk about economic prosperity, if you're a kid in the South Bronx, if you are a mom in rural Pennsylvania near a PFAS dumping site, who comes ahead when you get cancer and have a medical bill to pay? Who comes out ahead from that PFAS dumping? The CEO of DuPont or that mom? So when we talk about the bills and the prosperity that gets made from here and who has to pay that, we need to understand a very simple economic concept called externalities. Externalities. The costs of pollution, the cost of poisoning that are not factored into the profit margin of the corporation that's actually wreaking havoc on this planet. And when we talk about issues like climate change, it is at its core an issue of externalities. Because ExxonMobil and all of these oil companies can afford to burn this planet to a crisp because it makes them a pile of money. Now, Administrator Regan, I want to thank you because in the character attacks that you have experienced in this hearing, I know that you have spent your entire time and your entire federal service
Your time is up. I
protecting
appreciate
families
it
from
this
being
morning.
poisoned.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, I would now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Reagan, as part of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, the EPA established the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights, which now manages $3 billion for environmental and climate justice to fund community-based NGOs. As part of the allocation, $600 million is devoted to the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities grant-making program, which has shown serious signs of waste, fraud, and abuse. More alarmingly, some of this money has been designated for groups opposed to the interests of the United States and her allies. So my questions today, Mr. Reagan, are yes or no, very simply yes or no. Administrator Regan, environmental justice grantees have partners and affiliates who also receive funds from the EPA. Are any of these groups or affiliates who receive this money anti-American, yes or no?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are any of these groups who receive this money anti-Semitic, yes or no?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are any of these groups explicitly anti-Israel?
You're talking about that have received money?
That are on the list to receive money, correct? Yes or no? Are any of these groups explicitly anti-Israel? Do they hate Jews?
None of these groups have
Okay,
received
are any
money.
of these groups opposed to police and law enforcement? Yes or no?
I think we have to establish the point that none of
The
these groups have
question is
received
yes
money.
or no. Are any of these groups opposed to police and law enforcement? Yes or no?
None of the groups have received money.
That's not the question. Are any of these groups who are allotted to get money from this fund anti-police? Yes or no?
I'm not
You know
quite
exactly what I'm
sure.
talking about. Are
Yes.
you familiar with the group called Climate Justice Alliance? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. I was surprised to learn that $50 million has been designated for Climate Justice Alliance, a group which explicitly publishes a Free Palestine section on its website. On the website, there are dozens of anti-Semitic and alarming images designed to be printed and used in the violent pro-Hamas protests we've seen across the country. Here are a few of them this morning. This first image includes a slogan that is widely recognized as a call to eradicate the state of Israel. Is this the official position of the Biden EPA? Yes or no?
Is it the what?
Official position of Biden's EPA? Yes or no?
That is not our product.
Does this sign protect the environment? Yes or no?
That is not our problem.
This group, where this image came from, is designated to receive $50 million.
Has that group received
So
any
this sign says Freedom for Palestine. What does it say at the bottom? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Should taxpayers pay for this kind of thing,
Well, I
yes
think
or
you're
no?
misrepresenting the fact.
We're not misrepresenting. My second image that I'm going to show you today.
You're
This
misrepresenting the
image
facts.
calls, I'm speaking and I'm going to reclaim my time.
Yeah, you're misrepresenting.
This image calls to defund the police and accuses the United States of violence. Is this the official position of Biden's EPA, yes or no?
No, that's a problem.
Okay, does this sign protect the environment, yes or no?
I don't know what that's.
The group that produces this sign is allotted to get $50 million from U.S. taxpayers. The next
what is
image,
your definition
the
of
next
allotted?
image I'm going to show you, I would like you to read this poster from your seat. Can you tell me what this says?
I think you can read for yourself.
I'm asking you to read the poster. What does it
You
say?
can read it for yourself. I abhor.
What does it
bigotry.
say? This
I
image
abhor
says,
bigotry, and I will not
abolish
repeat.
prisons everywhere. This image says, free Palestine. This image says, stop Cop City. This group that produced this poster is allotted to receive $50 million from U.S. taxpayers.
That group has
This
not
is
received
disgusting.
one dime from
This
EPA.
image, this next image, adds an anti-Semitic message, and it calls for defunding the police. This is particularly special. Is this the position, the official position of Biden's EPA? Yes or no?
That fund, they have not received one dime.
Does this sign protect the environment? They are slated to receive $50 million
They have not
from
received
taxpayers.
one dime from EPA.
So you're saying on this next image, this is probably the left's favorite. The quote on this image is from a convicted murderer of a police officer that is still at large and wanted by the FBI. Does the Biden EPA support this position? Yes or no?
These hypotheticals.
So today,
have nothing to do with
our
EPA.
witness can't even answer the questions. $50 million was going to go to this organization vis-a-vis U.S. taxpayers. So you're going to tell me today, are you promising that this group will not receive a single dime? Yes or no?
None of these groups that you have paraded up here have received one dime.
Will you promise to ensure that they won't receive a single taxpayer dollar? This particular group is slated to get $50 million.
Listen,
will you promise me today that they will get zero?
First of all,
yes or no?
half the things you've put up there are offensive, right?
They are offensive, and like I said, it is a
second of all-
fact. This group is going to get is slated to get $50 million from U.S. taxpayers.
None
So
of these
our
groups-
witness today,
Madam
let's show,
Chair-
can't even answer the question.
Madam Chair, will you just allow him to answer you? I think it'd be fair to allow him to answer you.
None
He
of these
hasn't
groups
answered a
have
single
gotten
question.
one dime from EPA, for the record.
Will you promise today that they will receive $0?
None of these groups have gotten one dime from EPA.
I'm sitting in the chair, you're not. So thank you, and I yield back. All right, I will now yield to Ms. Brown from Ohio.
Mr. Regan, I would like to yield to you as much time as you would like to consume to respond to the allegations that were hurled upon you.
Well, I appreciate that because I think it's a gotcha game to put posters and statements that many of us may not agree with, see for the first time, and then accuse the agency of supporting something that is not true. None of the groups that were presented there have received one dime from EPA. People have applied for resources. We're going through a very thorough evaluation, and we have a process to determine who should and should not receive federal funding. Those are the facts.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Oversight. And it's great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I want to begin by thanking you for the Environmental Protection Agency diligent work in my district, Northeast Ohio, where, as Ranking Member pointed out, is just one example of how the Cuyahoga River was historically polluted, one of the most polluted bodies of water due to the amount of industrial waste dumped into it. As you know, Cuyahoga could not sustain any life at one point. Caught fire more than a dozen times. But thanks to the hard work of the EPA and the Cleveland community, this is no longer reality. I am proud to have cast one of my very first votes in Congress in support of President Biden's and Vice President Harris's and Democrats-led bipartisan infrastructure law to continue to clean up our precious water resources. which are critical to Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, and the country. EPA's commitment to restoring the Cuyahoga River area economically and environmentally shows how this administration is prioritizing environmental justice. So, Administrator Regan, can you explain what more needs to be done to clean up and support the Cuyahoga River and surrounding areas, both environmentally and for the people who live there?
Well, thank you for the question, and also thank you for hosting me and Secretary Fudge in Cleveland a while back. Listen, I think since the Great Lakes Initiative started in 2010, significant progress has been made. But under your leadership and the leadership of your colleagues partnering with President Biden, we anticipate investing approximately $100 million of EPA bill funds to support and continue the great work that you all are leading. Construction resulting from this funding will start at the end of this year, and it will remove the largest impediment to water quality remaining in the Cuyahoga River. So that'll drive regional economic development, it'll restore important ecosystems, and it will turn this, this precious body of water back to the natural state that it should be. So thank you for your advocacy there.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib from Michigan.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you so much, Administrator Regan, for being here. You've been to Detroit, you've been to Michigan several times. I don't think I did get you to come out to meet some of our residents living on Beneteau Street yet, but Beneteau Street on the east side of Detroit is a predominantly black, very working class, low income, poor community, and they have a massive Stellantis auto plant complex in their backyard. It's been making them sick and ruining their quality of life for years. Some can't even have outings outside with their families, barbecues, birthday parties. The odor is unbearable. I've experienced it myself, Administrator. And state regulators in Michigan had issued Stellantis air permits. And they had the public meetings, they did the whole process, but they failed to ensure that they complied with the permit conditions. They were required, Stellantis was required to install pollution controls. And they failed to install them correctly. I think they withheld that information for months. I don't know if it was 6 months, 7 months, it was months. Even though the residents were saying something's wrong here, the odor, something's wrong here, there's something wrong. And again, they did not fix it for months. This is, our residents, one, they didn't feel believed by the state for a long time. But they also believed, wait, why are they always routinely, the state, approving pollution permits that they know are poisoning predominantly black, brown, immigrant, low-income communities across Michigan? So they worked with a nonprofit organization called the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, and in November, I believe, or in 2021, they filed a Title VI civil rights case, a complaint. Are you familiar at all with it at all?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so Administrator Shore and some of the members of the team at Region 5 talked to me about this. You know this. I mean, the EPA was pursuing an informal resolution agreement for more than a year with community members at the table, Administrator, and again, trying to get towards a resolution with the state. And all of a sudden, the state's like, nah, we don't want to talk to them anymore. And EPA was like, okay. Do you know why?
Given that this is an active Title VI case, I can't.
Microphone, make sure your microphone's on.
Given that it's an active Title VI case, it's improper for me to comment on or speculate.
Yeah, but it sounds like you guys are letting them off the hook. The leverage that we have as and I want you to know, I want them to feel like their lives are important under an administration that says they care about clean air and water, right? And it's hard for me, and no matter who's the president, administrator, I'm going to be very much always about holding them accountable. So as I understand, the law is clear. When there's an informal resolution agreement cannot be reached, EPA must investigate and issue findings that determine whether or not discrimination occurred. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing that?
Let me take this concern back to our Title VI lawyers and team that's working on
Please.
this, and we will keep you apprised as much as we can.
And Administrator Regan, this is out of love and respect. I grew up in a neighborhood, honestly, I would come into my house as a little child, Chairman, smelling like rotten eggs. All my friends had asthma. I mean, it's awful. So I'm asking the EPA to take this complaint seriously.
Yes.
Set a precedent that you care and watch. No matter who is the governor, no matter who is in charge, it's important that we're consistent. And Mr. Regan, you know this, Administrator Regan, please fight for them like you live on Beneteau. Mm-hmm. Fight for them like you live there, because they have nobody else but us.
Yeah.
And we're blessed that we have a nonprofit that took the case, but we can't allow, again, politics and all these kinds of aspects come into play. We have to be consistent. Again, no one told them to look away when months and months and months went with them not complying with their own air permits. You know that. Companies put it in there. They sign it. They should comply with their own air permits, right? And again, I say this on behalf of many of my residents. We are doing good work in progress, but many of the young people, I know them. I have an 18-year-old at home. We're not moving with the urgency still that I think is needed. And implementation matters, you know that. And a lot of folks are not seeing the change they need immediately. So again, I'm here as a partner.
Yes.
And I'm here to bring those folks and those residents at the table with you. Thank you so much. I yield.
Thank you.
And I might add, we've gone on our side over about 1 minute and 45 seconds. I've agreed to yield that much time to the ranking member to get caught up, and then we'll proceed with the majority.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to pose one question to Ms. Tlaib and then one to the administrator. You just made a very eloquent and passionate brief on behalf of the significance of enforcement, aggressive agency enforcement of the rules that we have under federal legislation. The Project 2025 plan that everybody's talking about, and our friend and colleague from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, talked about the importance of deregulation, that is loosening up regulation. And I wonder what you would say about that in general, and then also specifically about deregulation of corporations at a time that we're also hearing from our friends about the importance of regulating women's bodies and women's choices, with 1/3 of American women not being able to get access to an abortion in America, and also further crack down on birth control and IVF and so on.
No, Ranking Member Raskin, it is bizarre. Even today, thinking about the fact that they consistently want to regulate the bodies of women, but also even the fact that our bodies are more regulated than even around the gun crisis, around the fact that right now, many of our constituents and our families continue to say to me, we have a right to breathe clean air, right? We have a right to access clean water, right, Rashida? Why aren't we working towards that? To allow corporations to have a free will of going ahead, because let me tell you, I don't care if you're red or blue state, they will poison your residents if you let them. They will. And so, shame on those that continue to promote this Project 2025. And again, the sense that corporations have all this free will, and they don't care about our public health. They care about the bottom line. They care about profiting off of the pollution they spew out to residents, especially ones that are currently struggling to even access health care right now.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll have to get to the question to you later, Mr. Mayor.
Although I have not agreed with Byron Donalds in the past on certain comments he has made, his comments in this hearing stood out for me. Here's what he had to say.
Our chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, who I have read is on the short list to be potentially the next Vice President of the United States. Mr. Donalds, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Regan, thank you for being here. Earlier this year, the D.C. Circuit, the D.C. District Court here actually invalidated EPA's designation that allowed the state of Florida to process Clean Water Act permit applications, a process that's been in place for the last 3 years. Our concern, obviously, in the Sunshine State is that EPA agreed to essentially give us primacy in going through that permit process as opposed to having to go through the Army Corps of Engineers. In short, does the EPA still stand beside the decision to give the state of Florida primacy with respect to proceeding with 404 permits for the Clean Water Act and Endangered Species Act?
I believe that is the case, but let me circle back before I give you a definitive answer on where we are with that process.
You believe you're still with us, or you're not? I want to make sure I get it clear.
Yeah, I believe we are still following what the court has told us we should do, which I know there was a court ruling, and I know there was some consternation there. So let me circle back with you to see exactly where we are on that case.
Okay. The reason why I bring it up, and it's important for our state, since we've taken over that process from the Army Corps, permit applications have, in terms of time, have decreased from roughly around 2 years to 6 months. Obviously, the Sunshine State is, if not the fastest growing state in the country, one of the fastest growing states in the country for a myriad of reasons. So our ability to process these permits, where yes, we do have a lot of waterways that are critical to the ecosystem of Florida, and we take that very seriously in my state. But I think it's important that whether it's Florida or any other state that has that flexibility, that you do have state administrators and state personnel with respect to environmental protection who do take this incredibly seriously, and being able to partner with EPA in order to be able to still process these applications that are important for our economy as well as our environment. That's something critical for us going forward. I hope that the EPA agrees with that.
Absolutely, and as a former state regulator, I definitely understand the importance of the delegated authority, and I believe how we got to this situation where there were some concerns about the administration of the program, and I don't know if we resolved those or not, but I think the court has spoken on that, and so I'll circle back with you to see where we are on that.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. I want to switch gears. Obviously, the EPA came out with the Clean Power Plan 2.0. My concerns are with a couple of things, but primarily 60% of all electricity generation in the United States comes from coal and natural gas. Under the EPA's Clean Power Plan 2.0, essentially coal will be regulated out of existence, and there will be additional burdens put on new natural gas plants that may or may not come online in the United States. Considering your previous statements about wanting to make sure in this hearing that nobody in our country is left behind when it comes to having a clean environment and a clean water, clean air, et cetera, for our citizens, isn't it also a concern that if that plan goes into effect and the power generation that we typically use right now would go away, that electricity prices would skyrocket on poor families, whether they may be black families, Hispanic families, white families, that their costs would go up exorbitantly under that same plan? Wouldn't they be left behind by the Clean Power Plan?
Well, we spent a lot of time with the industry, with the grid operators, and here are the facts from our vantage point. Number one, these control technologies don't have to be put in until 2020, 2031, 2032, so we're talking about some time down the road. Number two, all of our cost estimates say that the actions we're taking will only potentially increase price by less than 1%. And number three, that the approach we're taking, because of the diligence that we've done, will not have any impact on reliability. To the point we were just discussing, this national rule is delegated to the states, and each state will design a state implementation plan that gives it flexibility on how it reaches these goals.
Administrator, I got to cut you down because we've got 20 seconds,
sure.
Congressional hearings. I'm going to respond with this. Whenever we get information from experts who say that costs will be contained in a certain strata, that typically is not the case. Even with the tax credits with the Inflation Reduction Act, CBO said it would cost around $260 billion. Wall Street is saying the value of those credits is upwards of $1.3 trillion and higher. So when you say that essentially regulating out coal and some aspects of natural gas in the United States will only lead to a 1% increase in electricity costs, that simply does not add up. And at the end of the day, whether it's 2024 or 2032, it is poor people in this country who are going to be left behind by that type of proposal. Chairman, I'm over my time. I yield back.